Hello, this is Jason. I'm an engineer on the DevTools team, and in this video we're going to take a look at adding some functionality to this event listeners component. In the last video, we made these event listeners clickable. So when you would click on an event listener, it would take you to that source. We're debugging to do MVC here, and to do MVC uses jQuery, and every event handler is on the same line, so this demo isn't very exciting, but it does the trick. In this video, what we're going to do is add a little checkbox next to each of these event listeners, so you can add a breakpoint for any event listener. And that checkbox is going to work a lot like breakpoints over here, where when there is a breakpoint, it's checked, and when there isn't, it's not checked. The only difference here is that when the breakpoint's not checked here, the breakpoint's going to be disabled. In our case, I was about to say when it's not checked, it's going to be removed, but I realized that might be kind of weird because you can't just keep checking. So, revision to the spec. When the checkbox is not checked, the breakpoint is disabled, but there will also be a button over here for deleting it. Yeah, that's what we're going to do for now. On the debugger, we do it live. So, I guess the first thing I want to do here is add these checkboxes, and I'm just going to rip the code straight from breakpoints. So one thing that's nice about the debugger is that all of our components are in the same folder, so it's really easy just to do components and then find what you're looking for. And here's our breakpoints class. Usually there's a function for rendering a breakpoint or just any item. And so here's the one for breakpoint, which I guess looks kind of complicated, but I'm not even going to think about it too much. I'm just going to grab this input. And now I'm back in event listeners, and I'm just going to throw it in. I don't know what's going to break. I don't care, but that's fine, right? Oh, this is a hack that Zachary added so that when you would click on a breakpoint, it wouldn't propagate the click up and then actually delete the breakpoint. So we're going to remove that. We don't need that. And here's the onChange handler that handles changing the checkbox. I'm going to remove that for now because all I want to do is see this checkbox. And I'm going to rename breakpoint checkbox to listener checkbox because we aren't the best BEM people. We are working on it. And let's see if we can find an input here or checkbox. Yeah, so we've got these grid checkboxes with margin left 0. It might not be needed, but let's just throw it in and then we can always adjust. See if that's what we called it. Yeah. All right, so we have an input. Let's see how it looks. Kind of looks bad, but that's not the purpose of this talk. So we'll roll with it. All right. Let's go in and add this handle checkbox function. So I'm going to go back to breakpoints, handle checkbox. Just more code. And then we can wire this back up. And I'm going to say is disabled now is just true. I don't know. If I do that, then it should always be off. Oops. I needed to add a function here. You probably saw it and I didn't. Yeah, so now I'm just, every time I click, well, it says breakpoint's not defined. Oh yeah, because we pass in breakpoint to our thing. So we'll pass in a listener. Now, I guess I have to refresh as well. Now, every time I click, it should be false. Yeah. Ish. Listeners not defined. Oh, yeah, that's because I thought I had a listener, but really I just have these things. So I'm going to just say I do because that's how we roll here. I want something, I get it. Yeah, we have a listener. And we have more errors, but that's just it catching up. I think. Yeah, it's not a semicolon, not a quote. So yeah, now every time, no. More copy paste instead of this dot handle checkbox, it's just handle checkbox. What we're going to see is we're going to click on a checkbox and nothing's going to happen because it should always be disabled. Disable breakpoint is not defined. Yeah, because of all this stuff. I'm going to comment that all out because more stuff. And instead of breakpoint here, it could just be listener because we've been working hard to get there. Cool. Nothing happens because we are always not disabled. Sorry, that was kind of a lot of whatever. Let's just make that checked and make checked true. It's easier to think about. Then we can delete this. Yeah, that looks great. And over here, we're always checked. Woo. All right. So now we've got a checkbox. That doesn't do anything. But we can begin thinking about it. So the first thing I'm going to do is see if I can get a breakpoint inside of each of these listeners. Right now, listener is basically just a raw object, which I can show you. So we do appstore.getState listeners. Sorry. Event listeners. And these listeners right now are pretty boring. But we can go and get a breakpoint for each listener if it exists. So let's do that. So all our components that have data, like app data, get it through this connect function, which is a React Redux thing, which knows how to get state, and then we know how to query that state for stuff. And querying state means using selectors. So we have this get event listeners selector, which can go and grab out the listeners, which is fine, but I'm going to try to do something a little bit more here. And if you thought that I planned this out before the video, think again. We're doing this live. So I want the listeners. And then what I want to do is I want to map over the listeners and get each of the breakpoints. So we can do and then here, I was going to try to do something clever, but I'll just do object because I know this will work. Well, I should never say that. But I think it's going to work. And then here we can throw in that breakpoint. So just to prove the principle, I'll say breakpoint 2 or breakpoint empty object. And And with this, is it extend or is it assign? Yeah, code. What this should do is just shove a breakpoint empty object into our listener object. So we are still getting these objects. Do we get what we want? So I can go to event, listeners, and I can pause here. And then my listener does in fact have an empty object. Okay, good. So now it's just a question of how do we get them? Well, all of our queries for querying this app state are in the selectors module. And if we want a breakpoint, we can say get breakpoint for source. I was I was hoping we could do get breakpoint for location. And the reason why I was hoping we could do that is for an event listener, we have the source ID and line number. So, you know, like, but we don't have the source. So we're going to go on a quick adventure and just write this function as well, because I think that's easier. Yeah, now that I'm looking at this, it's get breakpoints for source. So like there could be many breakpoints in a source. So this seems like a nice function to have. All these functions are defined in the reducer for breakpoints. So just go about doing this. They all take the state. And in this case, we're also going to take a location. Wait. As I'm typing this, I was looking up, or as I was typing this, I was looking up, and I noticed that get breakpoint has the same signature. So let's just take a look. Yeah, that was what I was going to write. So we're going to delete this and pretend this never happened, strike it from the record, and use get breakpoint. Location is a funny object, so I'm just going to look at what make location ID does. It gets the source ID and the line, and everything's fine. I actually don't think we need to do toString now because we're doing interpolation, so we'll throw that in and see if we break things. And then we have to add the select for get breakpoint. So I'll just throw that in here. And now we need to pass in the state and the location. And that's going to be source ID. And that's going to be line, I think. Yeah. We could have even done something like that. And like really clear. See that jump there? This is a bug I have, that whenever Atom reformats the code, it throws me back to the top. But yeah, we could destructure and do this kind of thing if we wanted to. Sorry, tangents. So we're here. I am hoping that we can now get a breakpoint given the state and the listener's source ID and line. We'll see if that's true. So I go over here. That seems like it didn't break anything. And then we can go back up to the top, put a breakpoint here. It's going to refresh because something weird happened. It's not pausing. So we have a listener and no breakpoint. Oh, yeah, that's because we don't have any breakpoints defined. Aha! Let's try this again. So I'm going to go over here, add a breakpoint on that line. Go back over here, add a breakpoint in render listener, and we have a breakpoint. Hey, okay. So over here, we kind of know now whether it's checked or not. I think we could say it's certainly not checked if we have no listener. So let's just do that. But the other thing I'm thinking is that maybe this also like a disabled state, so we'll see. So, still saying checked true, so I'm just going to refresh. That's good. And then if I go over here and I add a breakpoint, still not checked. I was hoping it would just be checked. So I have a listener with a breakpoint. Oh, oops, it's checked if there is a listener. It's like the inverse, right? So refresh, because that's what we're doing. Now it's checked even though they're, I don't get it. I don't get it. Oh, we said listener, not breakpoint. Brr. We are checked if we have a breakpoint. Yes, I think that's right. We don't really have the production budget to to plan out these talks, these videos, so we just do it live. Cool. That's working. I want to say it's checked if we have a breakpoint and the breakpoint's enabled. So I'm just going to disable the breakpoint, and hopefully we'll see that it's disabled. Yeah. We do have a disabled field. So we are going to be checked if we have a breakpoint and the breakpoint is not disabled. Cool. Clicking these buttons doesn't do anything yet, but that's fine. Let's go do that. So, remember when I told you before that we could pass actions down, like select source? Well, we can also pass other actions down too, like enable breakpoint. Maybe it's add breakpoint. So, this is kind of cute. I'm going to re-enable this code. Remove this .props because that's not going to be used. And I'm beginning to realize that this function is kind of brilliant. Because remember before how I would pass in a listener? That was dumb. Let's just pass in the breakpoint. Pass it in. When I click on a checkbox, I'm going to pass in the breakpoint. And I'm going to give it enable and disable breakpoint. And of course, that means that when we pass in select source, somewhere, render event listeners, render listeners here, when we pass that in, we need to also have these guys and pass this in. If you're thinking, wow, this is really stupid that you have all these event listeners and your lines are getting really long, and it'd be much, much better if you didn't do that, well, we wouldn't have to if we had a React class. Then we could just do this.props enable breakpoint, this.props disable breakpoint. And maybe we'll do that right after this, if it all works. If it doesn't work, we'll fix it and call it it. But if it does work, we'll also make this a React class. Whoa, this baby just worked. Awesome. Yeah. We have just earned the ability to make a React class. Let's do that. So, yeah, React classes are actually kind of simple, but for whatever reason, I can never remember what to do, so I just always copy and paste. Yeah. I want this. And that. And I know I need a display name. I don't need a display name, but I really like them. And I think we do need them in the sense that we'll lint if we don't have them. And we had prop types. Did I just start adding code in a random file? Yeah, I did. Yeah, so we got these prop types. So we'll copy that in. And we got this event listeners component. And that's just going to become our render function, which takes nothing. And then we need our props, which will be watch ESLint pull us right up to the top of the page. No, it didn't. Okay. I thought it would do that crazy thing again. And now we don't have to pass in select source, disable breakpoint. That's kind of what we earned. And we could do this cute thing where we just remove the anonymous function, because as you map, the thing you're mapping over gets passed into the first parameter. But instead of render listener, it's going to be this.render listener. So that goes up here. We drop that. That generally is fine. We have all these actions which we can delete, which is awesome. That's why we're doing what we're doing. And handle checkbox is going to be moved in as well. And now ESLint is kind of saying, what the hell, guys, what the hell? And we had these actions which we're going to delete. And now it's just a question of finding all the places where we had local variables and making them instance variables. So this dot here, and I know I'm going to miss some. You won't. You'll be watching and you'll be like, Jason, what are you doing? But I'll miss some. All right, so render listener takes a listener and not all the actions. We destructure the listener here. Are we ever using this listener variable? We're not. So we're going to just be cute and do that again. We got to do nice things again. Checked is fine. This dot select source is fine. Handle checkbox is fine. Type whatever, whatever. Handle checkbox gets a breakpoint. Calls this dot enable breakpoint. That's not quite right. It's actually this dot props. Because all the actions are passed down as props. So that's probably also true for this guy. So we had 3, select source, enable, disable breakpoint. Those are all now being pulled from props. So we'll just refresh and everything's going to break on us. And you're going to watch me stumble. No. It just kind of worked. So the reason why I'm saying kind of worked is because it doesn't add a breakpoint up here, which is a bug that I'm just learning about. Because previously we had added the breakpoint and then clicking it would enable disable. So what I'm going to do is switch from enable breakpoint to add breakpoint. Now if we delete this one and refresh, maybe that also adds a breakpoint? No, it's not doing that. Cannot read property loading of undefined. Oh, I see. So let's make this a little bit more interesting. Instead of this, I'm going to say enable, go back to that, and we'll say if there isn't a breakpoint, we'll add it. So we're going to do everything. We're going to make the code really good. And we'll return whatever. If we do have a breakpoint and it's loading, bail, that's dangerous. If we do have a breakpoint, it's disabled, enabled, otherwise, it's enabled, disabled. Cannot read property location of undefined. Oh, sorry about that. You assumed we had a location. Yeah. I also don't even know if this is the right signature. So let's quickly look. Actions, breakpoints, lists all the actions for breakpoints, as you might expect. And add breakpoint takes location and other stuff, but just location for now. So we're going to pass that in here. And that means handle checkbox. We'll get a location, which of course we don't have. But we can kind of fudge it. So we know it's source ID and it's line. I notice that this is a let, so I'm just going to change that to const. So we'll just do that, and I don't know. Whoa, this kind of just works. And if I delete this, it adds it, and if I disable, it disables. And they're all the same, so they're all synchronized, which looks super stupid. But not bad. Not bad. The last thing I want to add is a little delete button over here, kind of like that one. And by the way, now that I'm writing this, I'm kind of realizing these components share a lot of behavior, so maybe we can refactor it later. I'm not going to have you watch me do that too, because that could be boring. So yeah, let's go to breakpoints, the component, and render breakpoint. And yeah, we have a close button. Of course, this is exactly what we want. Thank you. And we're just going to take that close button, we're going to throw it down there. Of course, it's probably defined somewhere, so we'll go get that. And what's going to break? It's going to say this.remove breakpoint. I don't know. Make that props. I wonder what remove breakpoint does. You can kind of guess, but you also could be wrong. Oh, here it is. It stops propagation as well. That sounds like a good thing. And we have a breakpoint, so we have a location. So yeah, that looks fine. Oops, something's wrong. Line 43. Oh, that thing. I'm guessing the move button is going to look bad. Yeah, it looks pretty bad. But I'm also guessing it's going to, well, this is weird. What do we want this to do? I mean, if I click here, then this should remove it. But what this is just like, there's no breakpoint. So we're going to futz this is something I hadn't thought of course, and say show the breakpoint. show the close button if there's a breakpoint. Otherwise, I don't know, don't. We sadly do this kind of ternary thing a lot. Whatever, so now we just have to style it. And I want to go a little faster because we've taken a lot of time. This has been a longer video, and I want to be respectful of your time. Float right. So I know float right is going to cause issues down the road if we have long selectors or something, but it also just works now, and so I'm gonna take it. The better solution is to use flexbox, which is what we use for breakpoints. But I don't really understand the flexbox API, so I'm not going to write it on a video right now where I prove to you that I don't know it. Oh, and this is just such a minor thing, but I really like how in our breakpoints CSS, we only show the close button when you're hovering, I think. Absolute breakpoint. Yeah, this thing, yeah. What I'm realizing is that we probably need some more BAM and componentize these checkboxes and close buttons a little bit more. But that's fine for now, whatever. So we add a breakpoint. It doesn't do anything because it's a breakpoint. Refresh. Whoa. Yeah. Pretty good. All right. Well, so if you got this far, thanks for sticking around, and I hope you enjoyed seeing how we add a little bit more complicated feature to the debugger. Getting this checkbox right meant using more actions, of course, querying the reducer to get a breakpoint for each listener. It meant that my OCD would be triggered a bit, in that we wanted to use a React class so that we weren't passing these actions down the functions. Instead, we could just get the props from the React component instance. A little bit of CSS too, as always. But overall, I think it's been mostly a success. I don't think I embarrassed myself too much with a 5-minute gotcha or terrible bug. I think it's been pretty smooth, and I do think that after watching this video, you could add a nice feature to the debugger with the same principles of adding some actions to a component, using some selectors to query the state, all that. That's basically how everything works. There is not too much more than that. Well, anyways, thanks again. Bye-bye.